What's up guys, Houndish here, and today, as promised, Bungie have given us an update regarding ability changes that we'll see in the final shape, and this does affect light and darkness subclasses that exist at the moment, so to give us all of that information, of course, they also confirm that we'll be getting an exotic update, so another blog post tomorrow around the same time, which will give us details about exotic armor changes, and as Bungie teased, there will be a new Vidoc for the final shape tomorrow as well, so certainly very busy times, but for today, we're going to break down all of the changes that Bungie outlined. So, as always, I hope you find this one useful. If you do, a rating below really does help us out. And without further delay, let's get into it. And as always with these blog posts, Bungie provide a lot of insight and background to some of the changes. We are going to focus primarily on the highlights here, and first they talk quite a bit about stasis. So they say there will be a new Frost Armor keyword, and with Frost Armor, we're fortified by layers of durable stasis matter, reducing incoming damage, and Frost Armor damage resistance grows stronger as you gain additional stacks. On top of that though, it reduces damage from PvE combatants by 4.5% per stack, and from enemy players by 2% per stack, so that sounds pretty interesting. Then, Whisper of Rhyme is reworked as well, and it no longer grants a Stasis Shard overshield when collecting a Stasis Shard, but increases the maximum duration and stat count of your Frost Armor. So an interesting interaction between the two right there. They also talk about how Stasis Shards have felt too limited for some time, and they say we're increasing the number of sources that players can build into to generate them, more on that shortly, but they're also increasing their value when collected with a harvest aspect equipped. So when Tectonic, Grim, or Glacial Harvest is equipped, in addition to the previous behavior, collecting any Stasis Shard now grants a small amount of health and a stack of Frost Armor. And alongside this increased potency, they're also implementing a shared cooldown on rapid Stasis Shard creation, and the cooldown is intended to be pretty generous, and primarily limits cases of oppressive behavior, like Triple Behemoth Trial Squads for instance. So for all harvest aspects, they've added new behavior, and while Grim, Tectonic, or Glacial Harvest is equipped, Stasis Shards grant a small amount of health and a stack of Frost Armor, then large Stasis Crystals from Grim Harvest grant more health and more Frost Armor stacks. They also say all of these aspects now have a standardized cooldown when a large number of shards are created very quickly, and for Tectonic Harvest, it now creates a single Stasis Shard when shattering a frozen target in addition to shattering Stasis Crystals. And again, with the intention being that Frost Armor can be granted through a variety of sources, they've updated things like Renewal Grasps and the Balador's Wrathweavers to directly grant Frost Armor. So for Renewal Grasps, they've replaced generic damage resistance with Frost Armor, and on entering a Dustfield Grenade volume, you or allies gain a stack of Frost Armor, and about every 0.9 seconds while in the volume, an additional Frost Armor stack is granted, which resets the timer. Then on the Balador's Wrathweavers, they've replaced Stasis Shard Overshield with Frost Armor when you activate your Rift or use your Winter's Wrath Shadow attack. So those sound like pretty interesting reworks. And to improve capabilities to generate Stasis Shards, for Whisper of Chill, they say Stasis Weapon Final Blows have a chance to create a Stasis Shard. Plus Whisper of Chains gets some changes, and it no longer grants passive damage resistance when near a Stasis Crystal or frozen target, but now grants a chance to create a Stasis Shard when defeating a target while you have one or more stacks of Frost Armor. Whisper of Fractures also gets a rework, and it no longer increases melee energy regeneration while surrounded by enemies, but grants a stack of Frost Armor when you shatter any frozen target with a melee attack. And finally, for Whisper of Torment, grenade energy gains are no longer dependent on your current health value. Base grenade energy regeneration amount per incoming damage event has been increased from 5% to 7%, and while you have Frost Armor, energy per damage event increases from 7% to 12%. So Bungie are very much leaning into Frost Armor. Obviously this will be a very key component of Stasis moving forward, so in a sense this is the big rework, and really we're going to have to see how it plays out in the game. But they do say we've created one brand new Stasis fragment as well, which is Whisper of Reversal, and while you have Frost Armor, dealing or receiving physical melee instead of projectile damage will slow your victim or attacker. Let us know your thoughts about that. And then we get into other Stasis tuning. So for Stasis Shatter, they've increased base PvE shatter damage from 200 to 400, which is pretty big. And they fixed a couple of bugs with Stasis Shatter as well. Then specifically for each of the classes, for the Warlock and Ice Flare Bolts, they've increased the maximum number of Seekers created before going on cooldown from 5 to 7. Then on the Hunter's Winter's Shroud, they've added new behavior, and slowing targets briefly increases your class ability regeneration rate, and bonus is reduced in PvP game modes, but it also now grants PvE damage reduction when activated. On top of that, for Touch of Winter and the Glacier Grenade, they've added an additional Stasis Crystal to the ring formation, increasing total count from 6 to 7, and the ring now forms over 0.27 seconds rather than instantly. There's also the Cold Snap Grenade, which no longer chains an additional time while Touch of Winter is equipped, but instead Seekers now duplicate when they freeze a target, and second and third Seeker chains now create a medium and large Stasis Crystal respectively, rather than every chain creating a small crystal. And finally, for Silence and Squall, they've increased the Squall maximum travel speed by 10%, and the storm now slows down when any target is within its area of effect to reduce instances where it could overshoot its target. Plus, they've increased the damage and slow tick rate versus PvE combatants by around 40%, bringing its freeze time from approximately 0.8 to 0.5 seconds. So that's the Hunter right there. Then for the Titan, for Shiver Strike, they're increasing damage versus PvE combatants by 10%. They've also increased the size of melee target search area cone by 50% and increased maximum lunge tracking angular speed from 7 degrees per second to 21 degrees per second. So overall it's a buff. Then for Glacial Quake, it now automatically begins sprinting when the player throttles forward. On top of that, for Cryoclasm, they've removed the sprint time requirement and it now goes on cooldown for 4 seconds after one extended slide. Plus, there are some quality of life changes for Diamond Lance, and they're increasing the thrown Diamond Lance detonation radius from 3.5 to 5 meters. They're also increasing the slam detonation radius from 6.75 to 8 meters for PvE, and for Diamond Lance, it now shatters stasis crystals on direct impact. They're also reducing the pickup interaction time and radius to match Strand tangles, so they'll be a bit easier and more reliable to use. So there we go, those are the stasis changes. Certainly, they're pretty substantial. Like I said, a lot of it does rely on Frost Armor being as good as we hope it'll be. So share your thoughts on that below. Next though, Bungie speak about Well of Radiance, which sounds ominous, doesn't it? So they say for Well, it now grants Radiant for 8 seconds when players exit the Well of Radiance area, but they have reduced player survivability while standing in Well of Radiance. So they're reducing the healing per second from 100 to 50 health points, and that matches restoration times 2. They are increasing the heal on cast from 40 to 300 health points though, alongside reducing damage resistance versus non-boss combatants from 40 to 20%, and for boss combatants from 40 to 10%, although they say for enemy players it will be unchanged. Plus, they're increasing the maximum orbs of power from defeating targets while in the Well of Radiance aura from 4 to 5. So a mixed bag of changes there for Well of Radiance. Give us your thoughts below. They do touch on Ward of Dawn as well though, and they say they've removed Armor of Light Overshield from it, and Ward of Dawn now immediately applies a full Void Overshield to the caster and allies that enter the dome, and Armor of Light now instead grants additional damage resistance to players inside of Ward of Dawn, which is 30% versus enemy players and 60% versus enemy combatants. Plus, the effective health of players inside of Ward of Dawn remains roughly the same as it was before, and the effective health of players inside of Ward of Dawn is significantly lower than it was before versus players in PvP. Plus, it can't further be increased by stacking Bastion barricades inside the Ward of Dawn. On top of that though, allies near the Ward of Dawn dome now have a Void Overshield trickled on over time, similar to the volume behind a Bastion barricade, but it no longer provides weapons of light by default, and the behavior has been moved to the benefits of Helm of Saint 14. But the Ward of Dawn caster can now generate additional orbs of power by defeating enemies with melee attacks in or near the Ward of Dawn dome. So again, a mixture of changes right there for Ward of Dawn, as well as Well of Radiance, so share your thoughts down below. Next though, Bungie speak about Arc subclasses. So for Hunters, for Arc Staff, the Heavy Palm Strike attacks and Heavy Air Slam blinds enemies. On top of that, for Disorienting Blow, they've decreased the base cooldown time from 100 to 90 seconds. And for Tempest Strike, they've added additional damage resistance versus PvE combatants when activated, lingering for a short duration after the attack. Then for the Warlock, for Lightning Surge, they've added additional damage resistance versus PvE enemies when activated, lingering for a short duration. Then for Ball Lightning, they're increasing the final arming shape size by 30%, and they fixed an issue where arming shape was offset upwards, higher than the maximum damage range of the projectile's detonation. And they also say for Chain Lightning, they're increasing the secondary chain projectile's base damage from 27 to 54, so that's a bit of a bump. Then we move on to the Titan, and for Thunderclap, they say they've added additional damage resistance versus PvE enemies when activated, and that lingers for a short duration. Plus, they've increased minimum damage versus PvE combatants by 20%, and maximum damage versus PvE enemies by 33%, and maximum damage versus players has bumped bumped by 14%. For Knockout, however, they've increased bonus damage granted to powered melee attacks versus PvE enemies from 25% to 50%, so that's pretty solid, but they've also reworked the healing behavior, and it no longer unstuns health regeneration on melee defeats, and now instantly grants a chunk of healing that scales with the type of target defeated. So for players, it's 30 health points, minor combatants is 50, mages are 75, and for champion plus combatants, it's 100 health points, so that's good. Plus for Touch of Thunder and the Storm Grenade, they're increasing the tracking travel speed when targeting PvE combatants by between 0.5 and 1 meters per second. And on the Lightning Grenade, it now applies Jolt after the first damage event rather than prior to it. We do have buffs for Arc Grenades as well, so for Storm Grenade, they're increasing damage versus PvE enemies by 20%, and the same Touch of Thunder remains unchanged. Then for Skip Grenade, they're increasing damage versus PvE enemies by 15%, and for the Arc Bolt Grenade, it will bump up by 15% as well. Then we get on to Arc Fragments. So for Spark of Recharge, ability regeneration bonus now persists until the player returns to full shields, rather than deactivating as soon as shields begin to recharge. And for Spark of Beacons, it now also triggers on defeating targets with Arc Power Ammo weapons while amplified. And finally, Spark of Frequency will now also grant 15 weapon stability on powered melee hits, in addition to the reload benefits. So overall, the arc changes I think on the most part sound pretty decent. We get onto solar subclasses though, and for the Hunter initially, for the lightweight knife they say it now has 2 melee charges by default, and they've increased the throw animation speed by 33%. They've also reduced the suppression time between throws, so knives can now be thrown very quick back to back. And to support this, they're reducing the internal cooldown on throwing knife refund from 1 second to 0.2 seconds. They also point out a niche strategy of a full team of hunters stacking Golden Gun in raids and things like that, so for marksmen, they say they are reducing the strength of orbs of power created on precision hits, so it is worth keeping those in mind. There are changes for Titans as well, and for Consecration, the slam attack can now shatter stasis crystals, plus ignitions generated by it now deal 20% additional damage in PvE. And they fixed an issue where Consecration's slam attack was sometimes unable to damage floating combatants, and one where intended PvE damage resistance wasn't being applied correctly. Then for Hammer of Sol, they're increasing projectile submunition count when Sol Invictus is not equipped. Plus, shrapnel submunitions will now deal additional damage when Sol Invictus is not equipped, with the damage increasing after the first 0.7 seconds of the projectile's lifetime. Then onto the Swarm Grenade, they're increasing the tracking shape size from 4 meters to 6 meters, plus they're increasing the linger duration from 7 to 10 seconds, and increasing damage versus PvE enemies by 20%. So those broadly sound pretty good. Of course, there was also the highlight about well-of Radiance adjustments as well, but we get onto Void classes here, and for Snare Bomb on the Night Stalker, they're increasing the linger duration of smoke after detonation from 3 to 5 seconds. Plus it now applies small damage over time to enemies in the smoke, that increases in strength the longer they remain there. And for Trapper's Ambush, they're increasing linger duration of the smoke after detonation from 4.5 to 6 seconds. And it now applies Snare Bomb's damage over time to enemies caught in the smoke, plus they fixed issues with it where Trapper's Ambush smoke effects could be obstructed by ground geometry. Plus for Stylish Executioner, they say the weaken effect can now be applied by glaive melee attacks, so that's interesting. Next up though, for the Titan, for Shield Throw, they're increasing the maximum bounce count from 4 to 5, as well as increasing the lifetime from 3 to 4 seconds. Plus it now increases its tracking shape size and strength after each bounce, increasing its ability to consistently find a new target. Plus they've slightly increased gravity and decreased thrust speed with each bounce. And damage versus PvE targets is increased by 20%. So again, broadly positive right there. For Offensive Bulwark though, they do say it can now only extend Void Overshield's timer to its normal maximum duration to prevent an issue where players could get into a bad timer state. And it also regenerates a small portion of your active Void Overshield with each melee defeat. And finally for the Warlock, for Chaos Accelerant and the Magnetic Grenade, they're increasing the maximum intensity of Physics Knockback Impulse by 10% when charged, plus they're increasing damage in PvE by 20%, and it passively decreases your Magnetic Grenade's cooldown by 10% while Chaos Accelerant is equipped. Plus for Pocket Singularity, they're increasing the detonation damage versus PvE enemies by about 50%. And they say from the first minute of your experience with Prismatic, Pocket Singularity will be available to equip and use. So that's something to keep in mind because it's a pretty substantial buff. On top of that though, for Nova Bomb and the Cataclysm variant, they're increasing the Seeker count from 4 to 6, and fixing an issue where Seekers could impact the environment on creation. Then for Vortex, they're increasing the linger duration from 7 to 10 seconds, and they fixed an issue where the linger visual effects were shutting off early. The very final set of changes though are for Strand subclasses, so jumping straight into it, for Thread of Warding, they're reducing Woven Mail duration on Orb of Power pickup from 10 seconds to 5 seconds. Plus for Ensnaring Slam, detonation volume versus enemy players is now a cylinder with a 6.5 meter radius rather than a sphere with an 8 meter radius. And this results in fewer instances of victims correctly attempting to counterplay by jumping but being caught by the slam detonation high up in the air. Plus they say Threaded Spike is also a bit too potent against enemy players, so they're reducing damage versus players from 79 to 70, and catching a Threaded Spike no longer breaks invisibility, so a slight mixed bag on that front. Then for the Warlock, for Weaver's Call, they've added new behaviour, and defeating a target with strand damage now has a chance to generate a purged Threadling, plus this damage can be from any source, including other Threadlings, so that's cool. There are updates to Grapple Tangles and Melees though, and for Grapple Tangles, they no longer fully refresh their duration when grappled to, but they do increase their duration by a maximum of 5 seconds per grapple, reducing to a maximum of 1 second added after 5 consecutive grapples to the same grapple tangle. So we're getting into quite specific changes here. Plus they say grapple melee will no longer be able to be used after firing your weapon, which is primarily intended to reduce the number of difficult to understand grapple melee deaths in the Crucible. So share your thoughts on that. Then for the Titan, Into the Fray will see reduced melee energy regeneration scaler from 4 times to 3 times in PvE, although it is unchanged in PvP. And lastly, for Banner of War, they're reducing the maximum timer from 30 seconds to 24 seconds. And Melee, Glaive Melee, and Super Damage bonus now have diminishing returns with Syntheseps as follows. So Melee bonuses are decreased from 1.4 to 1.15 times. Glaive Melee bonuses go down from 1.25 to 1.125 times. And Super bonuses are decreased from 1.4 to 1.2. And then Melee bonuses are decreased from 1.4 to 1.1 based on stat count. And Glaive Melee bonuses decreased from 1.4 to 1.05. So if anything, more of the nerfs that we're seeing really are for Strand elements. For Frenzied Blade though, they're reducing the forward offset for melee lunge target point from 0.5 meters to 0.18 meters to try and fix some odd behavior when using Frenzied Blade at very close ranges. So there we go guys, those are the changes coming to abilities. That was a very substantial list. I can see why Bungie split the kind of blog post into 2 different ones today. Obviously a mixed bag, some of the really potent things like Strand stuff, but also Well of Radiance, are getting somewhat predictable nerfs at this point in time, although there are a couple of adjustments to behavior in there as well. But plenty of buffs and improvements to other solar elements, void stuff, and arc subclass components, so very much a mixed bag like I said. And I think part of this as well is to make Prismatic very, very juicy at launch, so we'll see how it all plays out. Give us your thoughts in the comment section. For today though, those are the changes. As always, I hope you found the video useful. If you have, a rating below really does help us out on the channel. Also get subscribed for more Destiny content. Otherwise though, I appreciate you tuning in, and I hope you guys have an awesome day.